So, thank you, Sam, for coming back to do a little interview in English as well, talking about being an exchange student in Norway. And I just wanted to do this interview in English, where you can also tell maybe the students and parents sort of how can you go about and prepare yourself if you would like to become an exchange student in Norway. So that's what this little interview is about.
Yeah.
But maybe first, why don't you just start telling a little bit about yourself and what you did and where you stayed in Norway and when and for how long?
So in year 10, I decided I wanted to go on an exchange to Norway because I traveled there with my family and I enjoyed it. And when I got, I wasn't old enough in year 10 to go on an exchange. So a little bit later in year 11, I started looking at all the exchange programs that were possible. There's a Department of Education website that has a list of companies that are allowed to take exchange students overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically chose the organization with the website that was easiest to read and went with them.
Yeah.
And in Norway, I was placed in Bergen with a family of 2 parents and 2 younger boys. And I went to a pretty large secondary school, or Videregående skole, in Bergen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how long did it take from your application and until you actually got accepted and got a host family and accepted into a school in Norway? How long time do you need in advance to prepare?
I think I started getting all of the documents together maybe 6 months before I left.
Okay.
And I applied maybe 4 months before leaving.
Yeah.
Because I needed things like a birth certificate and passports and all of that sort of thing, especially for the visa. I needed a lot of stuff for that.
Yeah.
The host family I got 2 weeks after I was in Norway, so I stayed with the local coordinator for the exchange students for a week, and then went to my host family once that was all confirmed. But that's a bit different if you apply a year in advance, because they have so much more time to find you an exchange family.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you would sort of say that the earlier you apply, the earlier you probably get to know if you get or who will be your host family.
Yeah. They actually tell you you're accepted pretty quickly. They say, "Yep, you're in, but now we need to find you a host family and a school."
Yeah. Yeah, I had that with a couple of other students too. It seemed to actually but one changed their host family and the place she actually was going to, but I think to a place that was much better for her because she was into skiing and all these things, and she actually came to Lillehammer, which was perfect. For her and things. So, but it seemed to be quite common as well that actually the host family, it can take a bit of time or things can change and the school, and I guess it's a big jigsaw puzzle that everything has to. So you actually applied when you was in year 11?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the start of year 11, and then I left about August.
Yeah, so sort of midwise in your year 11, and then you
Yeah.
came to the second year in Norway, right?
Yeah.
Ja, andre året på videregående, second year after
Yeah.
secondary high school. Yeah.
That was, it would have been, because I'm a bit younger, I couldn't have done it in year 10 because of the EU visa rules. You have to be 16 to get a student visa.
Okay, so that's good. Okay, so you need to be 16. That's the minor rule.
Yeah, unless,
If you,
yeah, it's fine if you have a European passport.
mm,
But if not, you need to be 16 to go on exchange.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And how long did you stay in Norway? And is that sort of like, can you decide for different time lengths, or do they have set sort of time frames?
I think they had 3 different options from Australia. You
Mm-hmm.
could be in Norway for 6 months or a semester, which is how long I was there for.
Yeah,
Or you can be there for a whole year.
yeah,
I decided to be in, or there's also a shorter option where you just go for 3 months.
yeah. Okay, yeah. And then is the common thing that in Australia you leave, so you actually start at the beginning of the Norwegian school year in end of August or mid-August?
Yeah, so it's kind of inconvenient for Australian schools, but it was fine with me because I started at the end of the Norwegian summer holidays
Mm.
and finished partway through the Australian summer holidays, so it worked out quite well for me.
Yeah, yeah. And then also you sort of get to the start of the school year in Norway, so you have sort of often you have new classes and new students and things, so it might be easier to get into a class as well, instead of
Yeah,
going to a place where everybody knows each other and it's all sort of, yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. And then, okay, in the interview that we're doing in Norwegian, of course, you tell us a lot about how you learned the language and what you did before you left and things. And could you tell us a bit about that, Sam? How much do they advise you anything about the Norwegian language and studying before you go there? And what did you think about it?
Well, I learned by using Duolingo for probably like 2.5 years before I left. I started using Duolingo
Mm,
to learn Norwegian, and that's where I learned most of the grammar and the vocabulary. Um, then I had the lessons with you where I was able to learn how to speak and understand Norwegian properly. And a bit later, and in Norway, I learned mostly just by speaking
mm,
Norwegian instead of English all the time.
mm,
If someone could speak Norwegian, I'd speak Norwegian to them. But the exchange organizations say you should learn as much Norwegian as possible before you go.
mm.
Realistically, that's not what most of the people do. Like the majority of the Australians didn't speak much Norwegian by the end of it, but it makes it a lot easier to be able to speak Norwegian and to make friends if you can actually understand group conversations and that sort of thing.
Mm. And because all the education is in Norwegian
Yeah,
at the secondary school. So if you don't understand anything, then you don't understand anything. If you
yeah.
don't, yeah. And to live with that frustration, of course, you will have to do that. But for how long? How long did it take you before you felt sort of comfortable in class?
Um,
Um,
well, before the, I think I felt comfortable like fully comfortable probably in the last month of my exchange, but because there were some things I missed. For the first 3 months, there were a few I'd often misunderstand things that the teacher said. And if a teacher walked in and then spoke with like a weird dialect, or was really old and didn't speak so clearly, I get worried that I wouldn't be able to understand them. But I getting comfortable with the other students. It was probably after 3 months when I was able to comfortably talk to them.
Yeah.
But it would be very different if I went back now. I went to school, because then it would be so easy to talk to people.
So, so what useful information would you give to a student now applying for exchange in Norway?
Learn to understand as much Norwegian as possible. So listen, expose yourself. Duolingo helps, but it also helps a lot to just expose yourself to as much Norwegian as possible. So I set my phone to Norwegian, so I learned lots of like computer words in Norwegian. And I watched Norwegian films, because Duolingo is good, but it teaches you quite slowly. And the more you see and you hear, the faster you take it in.
So you watch Norwegian series and things. And do you think that even if you don't understand much of the Norwegian, maybe in the series and movies that you watched before you go, would you say that would help you? Because I remember the first couple of years I was teaching Chinese students, for example. It took me, I think, nearly a couple of years before I could actually hear all the things going on. I never understood Chinese, or Mandarin, I should say, or Cantonese. But you could actually then, after a while, I could start hearing all the different sort of words and sort of more what's going on, while in the beginning, it was just like, it was all the same. And it was interesting to see how slowly I could sort of hear all different words and things going on, at least.
In that, watching movies and listening to Norwegian, I think definitely helps with that, because when I went to Norway, I could only understand very slow Norwegian, because it just sounded like noise when someone spoke to me. But that hasn't just helped with Norwegian. It feels like now Norwegian's clicked. Now I can hear separate words in French and German and other European languages.
Very good. So that's the thing, when you learn another language in addition to English, another European language, then you actually, because of course there are many similarities there, and you start seeing them. Because you're actually studying German now.
Norwegian helps a lot with that. There are so many similar words.
Let's see. Just a couple more questions, Sam. I was thinking, was it something that you would have liked to know that you didn't know before you went overseas, before you went to Norway, that you think now, if I only...
Probably lots of the Norwegian youth slang words. That would have helped a lot.
I think that on as a teacher.
But probably Yeah, I wish I'd
Mm.
known it would have been so difficult to understand people
Yeah.
just learning a new language, because that was the
Mm.
main trouble. I struggled.
Mm.
I could make myself understood, but
Mm.
I struggled to understand people with weird dialects or who spoke a little strangely.
Mm. And you have a lot of different dialects, of course, in Norway, and you are on the west coast and in Bergen again, which have it's not Nynorsk, but they have a different dialect, and yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. A special one, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, all the dialects in Norway are special.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no. So, but basically, like youth slang and dialects and things, be prepared. So, as you said, probably with the listening, that's one of the best advice. Just getting a lot of exposure, and that's one thing that we can with Netflix, SBS on demand, ABC iView, Apple, whatever you watch, Prime on on streaming and things these days, that you can listen to all these Norwegian series and movies, because there are a few out there. Do you have anyone that you could recommend?
Um, the one I watched before I left on Netflix, I think it's still on Netflix, was Ragnarok. It was
Okay, yeah.
um, it's it's not the best show I've ever seen, but it was very good for learning Norwegian words
Mm.
and getting an idea of what things were like in Norway.
Yeah, so can you tell us what is Ragnarok about?
Um,
It sounds a bit Viking-ish. I just
yeah,
heard about it, but I don't remember now what, yeah, I haven't seen.
it's set in the modern day in um, a made-up town called Edda,
Mm.
and there's this kid who discovers that he has um, the Thor's powers, and it's basically him discovering all of his abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I
Yeah.
don't want to spoil it.
No, no. Okay. Yeah, because suddenly I started thinking about what is the name of that series where the people from the old age is set in modern day, but then the people from the old ages are suddenly coming up from the fjord. And
Oh,
what's that one called
The
again?
Foreigners.
Yeah, The Foreigners. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw just a few episodes, and that was quite sort of yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
It's
haven't.
definitely interesting, and I was thinking I should have watched the whole thing. I don't know how good it is for Norwegian though, because they mix a bit of all. They make up some Viking Icelandic language, I think, too.
Yeah,
But yeah. No, so Ragnarok is different. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's on
Mm.
Netflix.
On Netflix. Yeah.
There's a film called Everyone Hates Johan.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, I that might be good for listening to Norwegian, but I couldn't understand any. When I watched it, the
Yeah.
dialect was too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
but there are lots of good Norwegian films.
It is, and also if you go to
Yeah,
NRK.no, which is the Norwegian ABC SBS, and they have different series, and I think I know from Videregående skole, from after secondary high schools, the school, I should say, from high school, and Scum is of course one that sort of got
yeah,
rules and things, but you need a VPN to watch some of those, I think.
yeah.
Mm.
One show that really helped with learning Norwegian was, and you don't need a VPN for it. You
No,
can watch it on NRK without a VPN.
yeah,
It's called Sånn er Norge.
yeah. Mm.
And the first episode of that's pretty funny,
Yep,
but
yep.
I could actually understand a bit of that when I watched it.
Mm.
So that's a good show.
I have watched all the episodes and I'm recommending it to you. Yeah, it is because it's a bit funny, satirical, and he's entertaining, Harald Eia, the
Yeah.
program sort of leader. And it's just like 15, 20 minutes. And you get all this useful information about the culture and what's typical Norwegian. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very good show.
Yeah. So
I've
yeah.
the main I think I just watched the first episode before I left.
Yeah.
Or that was the one that was most helpful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I have to go back and have a look at that one again. Yeah. Okay, so Sam, to finish, or we could talk for hours. It's always interesting to hear about your experience, but you can also go and listen to the interview that we did in Norwegian, which you talk much more about learning Norwegian, the Norwegian language, and but. So to finish off, would you say what's the main thing that you sort of took with you from your 6 months in Norway, and why should people go as an exchange student? And
Well,
do you have any advice for parents maybe being a bit worried about their kids? I shouldn't say kids, but yeah, about their kids.
Well, for parents, Norway's probably safer than Australia, so no snakes. As long as they don't get stuck in the snow, they'll be fine.
Yeah, no dangerous animals. Yeah.
Yeah. And the people aren't that dangerous either. But I think Norway in particular was a nice place to go because of the nature, but also that the culture contrasts a lot with how Australians interact with each other, just because everyone in Norway keeps their heads down and tries to avoid confrontation. In Australia, it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
But also just from learning Norwegian and hearing people speaking English as a second language lots, and then hearing them speak Norwegian as a first language, I feel like now that I've learned that you can't, if someone doesn't speak English very fluently, it feels like you don't actually see who they are until you hear them speaking the language they're confident in. Because so there were loads of people at school whose they weren't very fluent in English. They could speak English and they had a strong accent. And when you hear them speak in Norwegian, you think, oh, this person's really smart. But you don't hear that when they're speaking English.
Yeah.
So it feels like just with Norwegian and languages in general, it's a good way of having a little bit more empathy for other people.
Yeah. Good point, Sam. Very interesting. Good point. Yeah. And just, being more maybe tolerant and humble and open-minded and realize that, it's so much, so many things behind actually just the words we're saying. And
Yeah. I also learned a lot about English that I didn't know before. Learning Norwegian made it.
Lydia, do you want to finish up with do you have a little funny story there to finish off with, Sam?
Well, there's a line in Shakespeare that we have to do at school. Shakespeare says, wherefore a lot. And for ages I didn't know what that meant, like why he was saying wherefore.
Yeah.
And when I was learning Norwegian, I realized that the word for why was hvorfor, and which translates to wherefore,
Oh.
and which is what Shakespeare was saying. He was saying why.
And I have probably read more Shakespeare in Norwegian translation, than
Yeah.
English. So I was like, aha,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking, is he saying therefore, or is he saying therefore about you now? Because
Yeah.
I was thinking, no, wherefore and woodford, and that's such a good example of the
Yeah.
connection between the languages and the
Yeah.
history.
Yeah, that's just one example. There are lots of things that are a little bit more complicated, but
Yeah. Of course, learning another language and going to new places, it enrich our life. Yeah. Okay, Sam, thank you so much. And who knows, we may make another interview about more about Norwegian maybe at another time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.